He looked at her swollen belly, laughed, and said, "You sing. I bet you can't even hum a note without gasping for air." But that night, when the billionaire returned to that same bar, the same woman he mocked turned the entire room silent. And she didn't even have a mic. The dim amber lights of the velvet note shimmered off bottles, stacked behind the counter, casting long, moody shadows across the bar's cracked wooden surface. It was the kind of place where dreams came to hide, or sometimes to die quietly in the corner with a whiskey glass. But for Hannah Cole, it was simply the place that kept her lights on. She was 27, 6 months pregnant, and running on the thin thread of hope that somehow this wasn't all her life would be. Her dark curls were tied up in a messy bun, wisp sticking to her temple as she wiped a spill with one hand and adjusted her apron with the other. Beneath the soft fabric of her shirt, the round swell of her belly was impossible to ignore. But what truly caught anyone's attention, if they cared to look, was her smile. The quiet kind, tired yet defiant. "Table 4 wants 2 more mojitos." Rosa called from across the bar, balancing a tray on one hand. Rosa was her closest friend, loud, witty, unapologetically Dominican, and always full of stories about the kind of men she'd never date again. Hannah nodded, grabbing the mint leaves and muddler. "Got it." The clink of ice and rhythm of her movements carried a strange grace, almost like choreography. Without even realizing it, she began to hum, softly at first, then fuller, her voice blending with the jazz humming faintly from the overhead speakers. It wasn't just humming. It was music, pure and unfiltered, the kind that could make the air itself pause. "Girl," Rosa said, sliding up beside her, eyebrows raised. "You're wasting that voice on cheap beer and bar fights. You should be on The Voice or something." Hannah chuckled, brushing it off. "Yeah, maybe in another lifetime." But deep down, Rosa's words tugged at something she'd buried. Once upon a time, not too long ago, Hannah was chasing music. Late-night open mics, weekend studio sessions, small gigs at downtown lounges. She had plans, songs, and a partner who promised the world. Until the night she found out she was pregnant, and he vanished, leaving behind nothing but unpaid rent and an empty promise of love. Now, her dreams existed only in whispers between shifts. "Rick's in one of his moods again," Rosa murmured, rolling her eyes toward the back office. As if on cue, Rick, the owner, a barrel-chested man with a permanent scowl and a gut as big as his temper, stomped out. "Cole, you think people come here to hear you sing? Save it for karaoke night, all right? We got customers to serve." Hannah bit her lip, swallowing her pride. "Yes, Rick." Rosa shot him a glare as he walked away. "One day, he's going to realize he's got a damn superstar serving his beers." "Let him," Hannah said softly. "Some people only see what they want." The night dragged on, laughter, clinking glasses, the low hum of city nightlife spilling through the windows. Between orders, Hannah rested a hand over her belly. "You hear that?" she whispered. "That's your mama pretending she's okay." The baby kicked, a small flutter that felt like an answer. It made her smile. As midnight neared, the crowd began to thin, until the sound of the door swinging open cut through the lull. A group of sharply dressed men entered, their confidence as loud as their laughter. Expensive watches gleamed under the bar lights. Their colognes, crisp and heavy, instantly shifted the air. Rosa leaned in. "Look at these ones. They don't belong here." Hannah glanced up from behind the counter, curious. Something about them felt different. They carried the aura of people used to owning the room, people who had never worked a double shift in their lives. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered with slick-back hair, scanned the place like he was appraising its value. Another, younger, more restless, drummed his fingers on the counter impatiently. "Evening, gentlemen," Hannah greeted politely. "What can I get you?" The older one smiled faintly. "Just a round of your best whiskey." His voice was smooth, confident, the kind that commanded attention without effort. As she turned to pour, she caught snippets of their conversation, something about finding the next breakout artist, a new sound, talent that feels real. Her chest tightened. "A record label? Here." Rosa shot her a knowing look, whispering, "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Hannah forced a smile. Just tired. But her mind wasn't tired, it was racing. Somewhere inside her, a spark she'd almost forgotten began to flicker. Because if fate had a sense of humor, this was it. The pregnant bartender, serving drinks to the very man who could change her life. And though she didn't know it yet, that night, that moment, was the beginning of everything that would follow. The night the world would finally hear Hannah Cole's voice. The Velvet Note was alive that Friday night. The hum of jazz, the laughter of tipsy patrons, and the clinking of glasses blending into the kind of noise that masked heartbreak and ambition alike. But at one particular table near the back, the conversation was different. It wasn't about office gossip or bad Tinder dates. It was about money, music, and power. Ethan Blake, founder and CEO of Silverline Records, sat at the center of it all, mid-30s, immaculately dressed, with the calm, predatory charm of a man who never needed to raise his voice to get his way. His dark gray suit looked out of place against the worn-out leather booths of the bar. Beside him was Chase Reed, 28, ambitious, arrogant, and loud, the kind of man who talked more than he listened. "We need something raw this time," Chase was saying, sipping his whiskey like it was liquid gold. "All these polished TikTok singers sound the same. We need a voice that feels like real life." Ethan leaned back, half listening, eyes scanning the room with quiet disinterest. Real life doesn't sell. What sells is a story. People want pain they can play on repeat. Rosa, passing by with a tray, caught Hannah's eye and whispered, "That's them, the Silverline guys. My cousin follows their label on Instagram. They just signed that rapper, Lil Nova." Hannah's heart skipped. Silverline Records. The same label she dreamed of auditioning for 2 years ago, before everything fell apart, before life rewrote her lyrics. As she approached their table to serve drinks, she felt the old ache rise, the one that always came whenever she thought about the life she could have had. But she smiled anyway. "Here you go, gentlemen. The best whiskey we've got." Chase glanced up, eyes flicking over her, and then, inevitably, to her belly. "Thanks, sweetheart," he said, smirking. "Didn't expect to find a bartender expecting. Multitasking, huh?" Hannah forced a polite laugh. "Rent doesn't wait for maternity leave." Ethan cracked a faint smile at that. "Touché." The group laughed lightly, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Chase, a few drinks in, leaned forward, waving his glass dramatically. "You know what's funny? We've been talking all night about finding someone real, authentic. And here you are. You ever sing, bartender?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. Hannah blinked, taken aback. "I used to, yeah. A little." Chase grinned. "Oh yeah. What kind of songs?" "Lullabies." His friends chuckled. Rosa shot him a sharp look from behind the counter, but Hannah's smile stayed steady. "No, actually. I used to perform at open mics downtown. But that was a while ago." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his tone teasing but not cruel. "At least not yet. Open mics, huh? Must have been something. Think you still got it." The guys at the table snickered. Hannah hesitated, then decided to play along, her nerves tightening. "Maybe a little," she said, with a shy grin. "Want me to prove it?" It was half a joke, an attempt to lighten the mood. But Chase took it and ran. He leaned back in his chair, laughing. "Prove it? Here. Honey, this is Silverline Records, not American Idol. I bet you can't even sing." The laughter that followed was loud enough to make heads turn. Even Ethan chuckled softly, though his eyes flickered with something unreadable. Rosa froze mid-step. The bar seemed to grow quieter, though the music still played. Hannah's smile faltered, the sting immediate. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to stand tall. "Maybe not," she said softly, "but you never know who's listening." Chase raised his glass mockingly. "I'll take my chances." Ethan didn't add anything this time. He simply glanced at her belly, then back at his drink, a small, dismissive motion that said more than words ever could. Hannah nodded politely, her cheeks burning as she turned back toward the counter. Rosa followed her, furious. "What an ass. You should have told him where to shove it." "It's fine," Hannah said quietly, though her voice trembled. "People like him don't see people like me." Rosa sighed. "You know, one day, they'll regret underestimating you." But Hannah didn't answer. She just stood there, her reflection staring back from the mirror behind the bar, a tired woman with a baby on the way, and a dream buried too deep to matter. Yet something shifted in her eyes. Beneath the humiliation and hurt, something hardened, a flicker of defiance. As the men finished their drinks and stood to leave, Ethan glanced back one last time. Hannah caught his gaze, and in that brief, silent moment, she made a promise to herself. One day, you'll remember me. And when you do, you'll wish you'd listened. The bell above the door chimed as they left, their laughter fading into the Los Angeles night. Behind the bar, Hannah stood still for a long moment, the weight of their words pressing on her chest, until she exhaled and whispered under her breath, "You bet I can't sing? Watch me." The night after the humiliation, Hannah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Chase's laugh, sharp and arrogant, echoing in her head. "I bet you can't even sing." The words looped like a broken record, cutting deeper with every replay. By 2 a.m., she gave up on pretending to rest. The bar was closed, the lights dim, the air heavy with the scent of citrus and whiskey. Rick had already gone home, leaving behind the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft flicker of neon outside. She stood behind the counter, staring at the rows of empty bottles, silent witnesses to 1,000 stories. Then, almost instinctively, she reached for one, held it up to her lips like a microphone, and whispered, "You want it real? Let's see real." Her voice slipped out quietly at first, a trembling hum that filled the empty space. Then it grew, rich, raw, and heartbreakingly beautiful. She sang one of her old songs, a melody about loss and promise, about the kind of dreams that refuse to die even when the world laughs at them. The sound echoed softly through the room. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was hers. Unbeknownst to her, Rosa had come back to grab her forgotten phone charger. Standing by the door, she froze, listening. Her eyes widened. When Hannah finished, breathless, Rosa clapped slowly. "Girl," she whispered. "That was insane." Hannah jumped, embarrassed. "Rosa, I didn't know you were still." Rosa waved her off, grinning. "You're a fool if you think I'm letting that voice die behind a bar counter. You sound like, I don't know, like someone who's already famous and doesn't know it yet." Hannah laughed softly, but her cheeks were wet. "I used to think that too." Rosa pulled out her phone. "Okay, no more pity parties. I'm recording this. Sing again." "What? No way. Way. Now go. Pretend it's that jerk from last night. Show him what he missed." Hannah hesitated, then sighed. "Fine." She picked up another bottle, her mic, and began again. Rosa recorded every note, her grin growing wider. When the song ended, she uploaded it to TikTok with a caption, "My best friend, 6 months pregnant, and still singing better than your favorite artist." Neither of them expected anything to happen. But the next morning, when Hannah checked her phone on her lunch break, the video had over 10,000 views. Comments flooded in. "Who is she? I got chills. She needs a record deal now." Her hands shook. "Rosa, people actually like it." "Told you," Rosa said, slapping the counter. "You think the universe didn't hear that clown laugh at you? This is payback in progress, baby." Meanwhile, on her social feed, Hannah saw a post from Chase Reed. He was posing with a new artist, flashing his signature smug smile. The caption read, "Discovered another one. Guess I just have the ear for talent." Something burned inside her chest. Not anger, exactly, but fuel. He thinks he knows talent, she thought. He has no idea what's coming. Later that week, Rick called a staff meeting. "We're doing an open mic night next Friday," he announced, scribbling notes on his clipboard. "Local talent, small prizes, good PR for the bar. Y'all spread the word." Rosa immediately turned to Hannah, her eyes gleaming. "You have to do it." Hannah froze. "What? No. No way. Everyone here knows me. I can't." "Then don't use your name," Rosa said. "Sign up as someone else." "Come on, Hannah. What's the worst that could happen?" They laugh. "They already did that. Now it's your turn." The words hit hard. Rosa was right. They had laughed. And she'd survived. So that night, after closing, Hannah stood at the bar, filling out the small sign-up sheet pinned to the corkboard. Performer name, Ella Ray. It was her middle name, the one her mother used to call her by when she sang as a child. She looked around the quiet bar, the place that had witnessed her lowest moments. Now it would witness her rebirth. The days that followed were a blur of practice. Every night after her shift, she sang into empty bottles, rehearsed her timing, and worked on breathing around her growing belly. Rosa recorded clips, offering feedback like an overly dramatic coach. Less head, more heart. And don't forget to smile. Even Beyoncé smiles when she's killing it. By Thursday, Hannah could barely sleep. Her nerves were shot, her heart constantly racing with a mix of fear and excitement. On Friday morning, as she brushed her hair in her small apartment, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd been mocked days ago. Her eyes were steadier now. There was strength where shame used to live. She rested a hand on her belly, whispering, "They'll remember my voice." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The bar had never felt so alive. Neon lights flickered against whiskey-stained walls, and the low hum of conversation rippled through the crowd. The place was overflowing, locals, tourists, even people who barely fit through the door, all waiting for their Friday night fix of music and laughter. Rosa rushed from table to table, balancing trays, while Hannah tuned her guitar behind the velvet curtain, trying to calm the storm in her chest. She peeked through a small tear in the curtain. The sight almost made her lose her breath, every seat taken, every pair of eyes eager for whoever was next on stage. "Girl, this is your night," Rosa whispered as she passed by with a grin. "Go give them something to remember." Hannah smiled faintly, gripping her guitar like it was a lifeline. Out in the audience, at a dimly lit corner table, a small group of sharply dressed men nursed their drinks. One of them, tall and reserved with a sharp jawline and quiet authority, leaned back, scanning the stage with quiet intensity. Ethan Blake, the reclusive billionaire and founder of Silverline Records, had come here on a whim. His team had suggested checking out undiscovered talent. He didn't expect much, but he came anyway. When Hannah stepped on stage, the chatter dipped to a hush. She wasn't glamorous, no sparkling gown or grand entrance. Just a young woman in jeans, her hair loosely tied back, standing beneath a single flickering light. She gave a shy smile, strummed the opening chords, and began to sing. For a brief, golden moment, everything flowed perfectly. Her voice melted into the melody, her tone soft but strong, a fragile kind of beauty that silenced the room. Then suddenly, pop, the mic died. The speakers buzzed, sputtered, and went silent. A low murmur spread through the crowd. Someone at the bar groaned. "Not again!" Rosa ran toward the stage, panic flashing across her face. "Hannah, I think the system's down." Hannah froze, staring at the dead mic in her hand. Her heart pounded. She could already feel the old humiliation creeping in, the one she'd felt too many times before. But then she saw a little girl, sitting near the front with her mom, wide-eyed, waiting. She saw Rosa, biting her lip, worried. She saw the strangers who had quieted, expecting her to quit. And suddenly, she didn't care about the mic. She placed her guitar aside, grabbed an empty beer bottle from the counter, and lifted it like a microphone. "Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way," she said softly, smiling. The crowd laughed, and then the world went still. Hannah began to sing again. No instruments, no sound system, just her voice, raw, trembling, unfiltered. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The first notes hung in the air like spun glass. Her voice cracked once, then steadied, rich and powerful, echoing through the room. Conversation stopped. Phones lowered. Even the bartender leaned on the counter, entranced. Rosa stood frozen, tears welling up. Slowly, she lifted her phone and began to record. Every lyric hit like a confession, every note filled with heartbreak, longing, and the quiet defiance of someone who had lost everything but refused to disappear. Ethan Blake didn't move. His glass was halfway to his lips, forgotten. The room seemed to shrink around her voice. The billionaire who had spent years surrounded by polished perfection was hearing something human for the first time in forever. "She's good," Chase muttered beside him. But there are hundreds like her. Ethan's hand shot up, silencing him without a word. His eyes stayed locked on the girl on stage. When Hannah reached the final verse, her voice broke, and that break made it perfect. The room erupted into thunderous applause before she even finished. Some were standing, some were crying. Hannah blinked, overwhelmed, clutching the beer bottle close to her chest. And then, slowly, from the corner of the room, Ethan Blake stood up. He began to clap. One slow, deliberate clap after another, until the entire room followed his rhythm, cheering louder and louder. Hannah didn't know who he was, but something in his gaze told her that tonight had just changed everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of Silverline Records. The air was crisp, charged, as if the whole city had felt what happened the night before. Clips of Hannah's beer bottle performance had gone viral overnight. Millions of views. The caption read, "The girl who sang when the music died." Inside the boardroom, tension buzzed. Chase stood stiffly near the window, while Ethan sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. A dozen executives whispered about the girl, the moment, the contract. Then the door opened, and Hannah walked in. She still wore her worn-out jacket and jeans, her hair tied in the same loose knot. Rosa trailed behind her, unsure if she should even be there. Hannah's eyes darted around nervously. The last time she had stood before men in suits, they had rejected her without a second thought. But this time, Ethan Blake stood. "Hannah," he said softly, stepping forward. "You don't know me, at least, not personally. But last night, you reminded me why I built this company in the first place." The room fell silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. "I've heard hundreds of polished voices," Ethan continued, "but I haven't heard one that felt like yours in years. You don't need auto-tune, or lighting, or backup. You just need a stage." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "This," he said, sliding it across the glass table toward her, "is a recording contract. No tricks, no fine print. Just music on your terms." Hannah stared at it, speechless. "You're offering me a record deal?" "Right here," Ethan said. "Right now." Chase suddenly stepped forward. "Ethan, with all due respect, this is a PR stunt waiting to backfire. She's the reason anyone believes in us again." Ethan cut in sharply, turning to him. "You've forgotten what talent looks like, Chase. Pack your things." The color drained from Chase's face. He opened his mouth, but Ethan had already turned away. His focus locked back on Hannah. "Take it," Ethan said gently. "You've earned it." Rosa's hand trembled as she grabbed Hannah's arm. "Girl, are you hearing this?" she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Hannah swallowed hard. Every memory, every rejection, every night singing for pennies, came flooding back. And now this. She took the pen, signed her name. The room erupted into applause. Ethan smiled, a real smile, the first in a long time. Musical note Hannah in a studio booth, headphones on, eyes closed, singing her heart out. Engineers watching through glass, nodding in awe. Musical note her name, Hannah Cole, printed in bold on the studio door. Musical note Rosa wiping tears as she watches a billboard rise above the city skyline. Hannah Cole, live this Friday at the Avalon. Musical note backstage chaos, makeup artists, lighting crews, camera flashes. Hannah breathes deeply, clutching her mic. Then the stage lights flare. The crowd stretches endlessly, a sea of faces chanting her name. H-A-N-N-H, H-A-N-N-H, H-A-N-N-H. She steps forward, spotlight flooding over her. For a moment, it's silent again, that same electric stillness from the bar. Then she begins to sing. Every note echoes through the arena, stronger, freer, glowing with everything she's lived through. The world that once ignored her now sings with her. Cut to the audience. Ethan stands among them. No VIP box, no front row seat. Just another face in the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching with quiet pride. Rosa stands beside him, whispering, "She made it." Ethan nods, eyes glistening. "No," he says softly. "She earned it." As Hannah hits her final note, the lights burst across the stage, confetti raining down like snow. The crowd roars. Cameras flash. Hannah lifts her hands, smiling through tears, radiant, unstoppable. And as the scene fades, her voice continues, now as a voiceover over slow, cinematic flashes of her journey. The bar, the beer bottle, the empty streets, the roaring crowd. Sometimes, the music stops so we can find our true voice. And when we do, the world finally listens.